Alright, welcome to another Warframe builds video. So today it's Limbo, and if you've seen some of my older opinions about Limbo, you'd know that I wasn't really having a very good time with the Limbo man. But I do have a build for him, and it's actually very usable and good. It's just not really a preferred playstyle that I would consider super efficient, just because I don't like the way Limbo plays, but it is a good build and I could see how someone would like it, so here we are. So the purpose of this build is basically to set up all of your other weapons and never come out of the rift, and also basically have unlimited energy. If those things already sound good to you, welcome to Limbo, I suppose. So here is my build, and there are actually two mods in this build that are pretty easily interchangeable to swap out to kind of whatever you want. And those mods are Natural Talent and Mobilize. Adding Forma obviously gives you a lot more options for Mobilize. Natural Talent is a utility mod that I prefer because the extra casting speed makes it so that my times of vulnerability whenever I'm recasting Rift Walk is significantly shortened. So that's the reason I use Natural Talent. And also just having the higher cast time on all your abilities is really good as Limbo because you're going to be using them all pretty frequently, and some of the animations are just a tad too long for my taste. So that's my preferred utility there. You could easily swap this out for a stretch, kind of minimizing your negative range. I actually prefer the negative range to a certain degree because it allows me to be more specific in where my bubble is so I don't get blindsided by an enemy I wasn't sure was there. And that just helps me out in being more specific in the area that I'm shooting in, which ends up being very important with Limbo because he's very, very squishy. High-level enemies are going to have literally no problem killing you if you give them the chance to, so you want them to die the moment they enter the rift. The rest of this is just... It's just the build numbers. Honestly, like, more duration, you're in your abilities longer and they last longer. That's just a huge plus. And then you have strength for Rift Surge. Other than that, there's nothing really special about this build, other than just having so much energy and having the max efficiency. So, the weapons are a lot more important than with a lot of other frames because you want certain abilities of your weapons. So firstly is the Tonkwar, which is a great weapon on its own, but when combined with Limbo's abilities, it ends up being kind of devastating when used in the correct scenarios, where you're casting your 4 and you're in the rift. You bring a bunch of enemies into the rift and you just blow them all away. And I'll try and show that off the best I can, although you can only spawn 20 enemies in the simulacrum, so it's a little bit harder to show off than it regularly would be, and the enemies I test against are sometimes a little more dangerous than I'd like for the test. But let's move on to our secondary weapon. So for the test, I'm going to be using the Vacor Murloc, because it's a little more spam happy and more accessible in terms of usage. So it'll make the test go by faster, basically. But any weapon that can do like a significantly high amount of burst damage, like we're talking like the Brack, the Detron to a certain degree, Lex Prime for sure, if you can get those headshots off, that's devastating. It is insane. Vacor Murloc is a good middle of the road of kind of all of those things where it's very versatile and you can just kind of just blow dudes away with it. And you can shoot it very quickly. So it's the weapon I'll be using for this test, but there are a lot of viable weapons for this as long as you can get a lot of damage in right away, because you're going to want to kill people in the time that they have to sit down when they get into the rift. As for this final weapon, I'm going to be using the Jet Tag, and this is the build that I'm using to have some more finisher damage. Like whenever they come into the void, you have them opened up for a finisher. That combined with this low-level life strike. That 5% is going to heal you to full, like I'd say 99% of the time. So it's actually very useful for if you do take some damage that you actually survive, being able to heal back to full on the next enemy that you need to bring into the rift. And in general, this works pretty well. Life Strike, I'd say, is the mod that you would want to have if you need it on the just enemies that you want to bring in and finish. And just general, like, a weapon that can kill an enemy really fast, like a Jet Tag. Yeah, that is all of that stuff. I will say, your companion's usually not very safe and will usually die. So that's your companion doesn't matter much. I've been bringing Helios on some other missions to scan some enemies I didn't have. So I guess it's about time to start the test. That's just kind of the overview of the build. You're basically going into your 2, always staying in your 2 as much as possible, using your 1 to bring single targets in, using your 4 to bring groups in and blow them away with the Tonk-Ore, and always having Rift Surge up for your insane damage bonus. And we should actually look at that before we go. So the damage multiplier I get with this build is 4.5, which is actually a lot. Like 4.5 times damage. We're talking about that on weapons like the Tonk-Ore. For those of you that have used the Tonk-Ore, that probably seems like, why would you fucking even need that? That's stupid. Why would you need that much damage? Is that a real amount that you actually need? Like, really, though. Anyway, let's get to this test. Alright, so let's get on with this test. So I will say before we start that Limbo has a pretty stark advantage here against the majority of the units, and kind of the situation that I normally put frames in whenever I do test them, which is this set of enemies. So usually Limbo is going to just like clear this very, very easily, and the only enemy on this list that's actually of any real danger to Limbo is a Bombard, because the timing of bringing them into the rift is actually really weird and not actually always the same, because their animations don't always tell the truth. But hopefully they don't blow me up with some bullshit. Let's simulate. So obviously you're going to want to always be in the rift. You're going to want to always have Rift Surge on. Thankfully it costs like basically no energy if you put yourself in the rift first all the time. And you can eliminate enemies very quickly. See, those they still fire missiles at you, which is the super dangerous part. Also, I'm wounded. How am I? Oh, right. Anyway, that's how you get unwounded, just by doing finishers in the void with your channeling. These guys are all relatively weak units that I can bring over here, and there we go. Pop my bubble. For groups, the Tonk-Ore is like the reason you have it is for groups. Like that's what it's amazing at. Just for single target damage, I find whatever your preferred like high damage pistol is usually going to be fine. I would highly suggest a like 3 Forma Lex Prime usually, but this weapon's better just randomly shooting at the enemy and just murdering them super good. So I decided to bring it instead just for time's sake. Back on Rift Surge, so I'm actually doing way more damage. Out of range. That's a lie. You were distinctly within my range. Alright, so I'm left with... Oh, wow. I thought that was the last of the heavy units. You would have surprised me there. Alright. Alright, cycle back in. So for these heavy units, I think I'm going to want to use the Tonk-Ore anyway, just because of the significantly higher damage. There we go, just dump on that one. Bombards are the most dangerous. Like, I'm saving them for last. We'll get rid of you. Where's that other gunner? There you are. Okay, gunner's dead. Okay, now these two. I'm gonna refresh this. Okay. Alright, you can leave. Fire one more. Okay. Yeah, the timing on these guys can be, and also this, be wary of this. Because they'll do that shit even if you knock them down right before, or right when they're entering the rift. So, be very wary of that. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, bombards are actually really dangerous to Limbo if you're not paying attention to exactly what they're doing. But that's Limbo. That's kind of the way that he plays. It's a little on the slow side, but it's also like very methodical, and I'm sure if this is your preferred type of play style, it's probably kind of relaxing to play as him. For me personally, obviously, I prefer frames like Exgal and Valkyr, But I can definitely see how someone could enjoy Limbo and the way that he plays. It's definitely very unique, and sometimes it's actually the crux of certain groups of Tenno and their loadouts. Having everyone banished and just like spamming the shit out of powers, doing stuff like that. But yeah, that is my Limbo build, and I will see you tomorrow.